he gave us another one of those. Benavidez gave us another one of those Porky Medina, like 20 punch combos. There's a highlight that Showtime put out right immediately after the fight where, he had Lemieux against the ropes, ending the first round where he goes like in spurts. He's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Bye.
It's just so much fun to watch, man. Like watch it. It's like a video game. Welcome back to the RBR Recap, episode 18. I am Alex Burgos, joined as always by my man Gabe Brevis here after a busy weekend of boxing. Gabe, how are you, sir?
Doing well. I just flew back from Florida and my eye is healed, pretty much back to normal. So I'm feeling and doing a lot better.
Awesome. Great to hear it. We liked your look last week with the sunglasses, but glad to see you back in normal status. Look, we had a lot of boxing, so let's jump right into what we got on Friday. First of all, from Tampa, Florida, an exciting new entry into boxing. ProBox TV made their inaugural broadcast debut with a lot of heavy hitters behind the mic and inside the ring as well. You had the group of Antonio Tarver, Roy Jones Jr., Paulie Malignaggi, commentating on the fights in a card headlined by Meng taking on Pascal, a fighter that always seems to be written off on paper and then just goes into the ring and surprises you. And he's done it time and time again now, obviously in the later stages of his career, but he snuck out a close unanimous decision. And those scores were 115-112, 114-113, and 116-111. Before we get into ProBox TV, what they offer, what our thoughts were on that side of things, Gabe, I want to kick it to you first off to get your opinion on the fight, the action, and what you thought of the scores.
Meng had every advantage going into this fight. Taller, rangier, he's younger. He was supposed to win this fight, I think, and I think the consensus was that he was going to box him towards a unanimous decision, but he deviated from the game plan. He allowed Pascal to get close and to land short shots on the inside. There are some moments where he allowed Pascal to even unleash a barrage of shots while Meng was on the ropes. And so I think that judges like seeing that. They like seeing the guy who comes forward. And sometimes even if it lands on the arm, if it looks busy, the judges might appreciate that more. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not the right man won, but I think that Meng, by allowing Pascal to cut the distance, let the fight slip away from him. There was one knockdown in the 8th or 9th round that probably shouldn't have been scored against Meng because I don't think he was really dropped. But at any rate, he deviated from the game plan and so received his first loss as a result. Moving forward, it'd be interesting to see what Meng has in his future. He could still bounce back and fight for a world title fight in the near future. I think he may have lost his standing as a IBF #1 contender, but at any rate, he's still among the top in the division and could fight for a world title after 1 or 2 more victories. With regard to Pascal, he may have earned himself another big fight. You know, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Pascal comes up as a future opponent of Zurdo Ramirez. It would not surprise me because where else could he go? He could face the winner of Beterbiev versus Smith. I think it'll be Beterbiev, but let's not overlook Smith, but I think it'll be Beterbiev, and that might be a huge fight in Canada. Is it a winnable fight for Pascal? That's a different question, but it would be a big fight. And then Dimitri Bivol is a man who he's already faced and lost against, and it wasn't even close. So it'd be interesting. Maybe Pascal fights Zurdo Ramirez.
Yeah, I agree with you that he's got to look at maybe some of these other contender level opponents. I don't think the cream of the crop is something that he can contend with at this point in his career. You already mentioned that he did lose to Dimitri Bivol. We don't want to see that again. Even a guy that we spoke about last week who's moved up to cruiserweight in Sergey Kovalev. I mean, he's fought him twice. Nobody wants to see a third fight. Beterbiev is too much for him. Maybe a Joe Smith fight if Joe Smith loses that fight, or like a Callum Smith or Anthony Yard, maybe on that level. But like you said, Zurdo Ramirez, even though he needs a marquee name, I think at this point, I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if he came up as an opponent for Zurdo, because Golden Boy has a knack for, right when you think a guy has no other place to go and face, no other opponent other than like a top guy or a champion, Jaime Munguia style, then you come up with a Jimmy Kelly. So, look, we want to see, Zurdo fight someone upper echelon. Pascal, good victory for him, but he's just not at that level. He is a name, obviously. And again, I go back to last week. Sometimes, we're trying to think of who could Sergey Kovalev face. Well, sometimes, these guys carry weight and clout with their names still, even at the later stages in career. Jean Pascal is a great example. And he just beat a younger guy that was the number 1 ranked IBF contender. So he does have some momentum going for him, but it remains to be seen who he gets matched with. He's got a few more options than Meng, who wasn't necessarily obviously a household name. He had an opportunity to really bump his stock up and show people that he could fight. I did think he showed that he can fight. He's entertaining. He's very athletic, for all in all, we don't see many Chinese fighters, and especially when we see them, they're not this fluid. I think Roy Jones spoke to this as well. He showed some really good athleticism. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight again. I mean, if he could stick more closer to what his game plan should be, then maybe he doesn't get into those trouble spots and get caught with punches that he doesn't need to. But I think the eyeball test, I wasn't, scoring it round by round or anything, but eyeball test, I thought he had won a decision. A couple things worked against him, but all in all, hopefully it bumps up his profile. Obviously, we don't know how many people tuned in, but I thought if you did, you were pleasantly surprised with the action that you got, not only in the main event, but just the full card. And kind of transitioning into what we think about ProBox TV, I do want to throw in my 2 cents. I thought the fight week coverage was excellent. I like hearing Paulie Malignaggi comment. I miss him on Showtime. I thought he was a good addition there. He's exciting to hear alongside Antonio Tarver and Roy Jones. I think that's a good trio. And if you were listening in Spanish, Juan Manuel Marquez is on there as well. So you get a lot for just, the $2 if you pay the card. I splurge $18 for the year, because I'm a big time baller. But so no, $18 for the year. I mean, you get good quality fights. And even if you're a guy that really likes to hang your hat on, okay, I want to watch if there's a big name. There are some names, but also there's like ideas. So the last chance tournament, that's a really good idea. You get guys that are going to really put it on the line that may have gotten chances before on other bigger platforms. And now you're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Michael Dutchover is one of those dudes that you're like, oh yeah, whatever happened to him after the Showbox fights? He lost a couple. So I think those are pretty cool. Sonny Fredrickson as well.
Kendo Castañeda.
Yeah, Castañeda as well. Exactly. Kendo Tremendo. So I think it's a really good platform for those types of fights. I mean, I think it's interesting that in the promo, they say, we don't want guys that just counterpunch. We want guys that run. We don't want, they want action. And so they know what fans want. And then also, aside from the fights, you get some pretty high level commentary. You get the podcast stuff. That's kind of what I was really in tune to and really liked with what the presentation was, because Paulie mentioned it in the pre-fight press conference. It's kind of a throwback to the Friday night fight days, and something I grew up on, watching like Brian Kenny in the studio, Max Kellerman, just throw around a bunch of stuff, kind of like what we're doing right now, not stuck to one network. They had the Friday night fights, and yeah, maybe sometimes we got lucky with like a Mickey Ward versus Emmanuel Augustus, like banger that ended up being a really good fight or whatever, what have you. But sometimes you just got fights that cool. There's fights on Friday, but what you were tuned into was there was a fight coming up on HBO or there was a fight coming up on Showtime, and I want to hear what these guys have to say about it. And so same thing with the podcast stuff. You got Paulie talking about things, Roy talking about things. Really
Spanish
good
version too.
Exactly, Spanish version too. So you get a little bit of everything, no matter who you are, and you can kind of hear the hot takes on all of these different things. The social media aspect of the game, just like really good high level boxing talk, which at the end of the day, that's what we want to hear. Before podcasts and all of us, had this platform that we created to just shoot the shit and talk boxing because we cover it all the time. We live it. Yes. But before that, there was like Friday night fights, you would come home and you would watch these pre-fight in studio talks, and, Teddy Atlas would go on a rant.
There's no even score here. You're an official, right? You're an official of the state. Well, then you don't understand how to score.
That was something that you had to talk about the next day and leading into these bigger fights on Saturday night. So something that's definitely missed. not only those sleeper like classic fights, but also just the high level talking. So for me, from that perspective, it's something that's much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing what, ProBox TV can add to the game in terms of everything that we're getting in terms of streaming, different networks, and different promoters. And they're not married to a promoter, which is good too. So they can talk a little bit about everything. So those are my 2 cents on ProBox TV. Following the fights that we had on Friday night with ProBox TV, we got a stacked Saturday full of boxing, and none more important and more eye-appealing, I would say, than David Benavidez, top fighter at 168 pounds, taking on heavy hitter David Lemieux, a battle of the Davids on Showtime for the interim WBC 168-pound title, a name title, not an actual belt, whatever you want to call it, but a stepping stone, another positioning tool for the winner to be like, okay, well, I'm the guy now, 168, you got to fight me. Obviously pointed at Canelo Alvarez right now, not just because he's the cash cow of boxing, but, he holds, as of right now, all the titles because he became undisputed at 168. And so, what a lot of people wanted to see going into this 12-round affair was David Lemieux. He made most of his noise and won his title at 160. And so we wanted to see what could he do at 168 against a big, young, strong fighter like David Benavidez. Benavidez came out sharp. He looked really good, I thought. His defense was tighter probably than what we'd seen previously. I mean, Lemieux's a smaller guy, but he can crack and he can find ways between your guard. And I think Benavidez did a good job of defense and, had Lemieux out pretty much in the first round. If it weren't for that bell, Harvey Doc said, the referee after the fight, that he was going to stop the fight right at that point. But Lemieux was somehow able to survive until the third, until his corner stopped the fight and forced the ref to stop the fight. So a 3rd round stoppage for David Benavidez. Good performance for him and sent him in front of his hometown crowd in Phoenix. Gabe, what were your thoughts on this fight? What we saw from David Benavidez, how he positions himself now in a busy 168-pound division when you're talking about guys like Canelo Alvarez, David Morrell Jr., Jermall Charlo, if he moves up, Caleb Plant, a lot of these names and a lot of the guys that, David Benavidez has been calling out or had back and forth with. So, what were your thoughts on this quick fight, the knockout, and maybe the prospects moving forward for David Benavidez?
David Benavidez is such a monster. They always throw out the word every time there's a dominant performance. You see tweets and people on Twitter saying, "Oh, we have a new boogeyman in division." With David Benavidez, I think that terminology is very accurate. The dude's huge. I remember seeing him in person at the Chocolatito fight, and afterwards I thought, "Oh, this dude's like 6'4". He's fucking huge." You know what I mean? But then I looked up his stats on BoxRec, and he's only 6 feet tall, but he's such an imposing figure. I think he's like 6'1". Such an imposing figure, really tall, very strong, and he was very dominant. I think before this fight, nobody gave David Lemieux any chance of winning. Why? Because he's always been very flawed. He had 2 early losses against Marco Antonio Rubio and then Joaquim Alcin. The first one by knockout, the second by decision. And then he had an impressive run when he started with Golden Boy. If you remember, fighting guys like Fernando Guerrero and then also Gabe Rosado before winning the world title against Hassan Endam. I thought that was a really impressive performance. But then, as we saw with the Triple G fight, very flawed. Doesn't really have head movement. When he comes forward, leaves himself very open. Not as much versatility in terms of his offense when he's coming forward and moving his head. And Benavidez was able to capitalize that, right? And we also had those classic wins against Curtis Steven where he knocked him out cold. So I've always been a fan of David Lemieux, but we always understood that he was very flawed in terms of his offense and defense. And that's what happened in the fight against David Benavidez. With David Lemieux, he can knock people out and he hits really hard. But when he's in there with someone who can bang just as harder, if not harder, and who's much stronger, then there's really not much he can do. And so when David Benavidez started pushing the action, Lemieux tried to land hooks. It seemed like he hoped that he could cut the distance and land a hook, but David Benavidez was very defensively responsible. His high guard was up even at close range so that his short hooks wouldn't land. And that was impressive from David Benavidez, but also he used his strength and his power.
And that uppercut was vicious.
The counter uppercut. David Lemieux would try to land. He tried to step in with the 1-2 and then duck in to close the distance. But David Benavidez, like a button, as soon as he felt that hook to the top, he would come back with an uppercut and hurt David Lemieux. So there was really nothing that David can do in that fight. David Benavidez, like you said, showed a lot of impressive things. You know, he's more defensively responsible. We know he can counter, and he's just a physically imposing figure. And again, the word boogeyman, let's not use that with everyone, but this dude's so big and he's so strong that anybody at 168 pounds is going to have a lot of trouble, including Canelo. What's going to happen when it's round 7, 8, or 9, and David Benavidez hasn't been knocked out, and he can still throw 6, 7, 8 punch combos? You know what I mean? I think the consensus will be that Canelo probably maybe win that fight. He'll be the favorite. I'm not going to say he's going to win, but it's going to be one of his toughest challenges to date.
Yeah, especially if it goes in with that mindset that, like, I'm just going to wing power shots and break this dude down, which that you can't come in with that mentality. He gave us another one of those. Benavidez gave us another one of those Porky Medina, like 20 punch combos. There's a highlight that Showtime put out right immediately after the fight where, yeah, he had Lemieux against the ropes ending the first round where he goes like in spurts. He's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Bye.
It's just so much fun to watch, man. Like, watch it. It's like a video game. And very accurate. I thought he worked well behind the jab. You know, we only got to see a little bit of what he did, but I thought, you know, in fights past against, you know, Ellis and Durrell, sometimes he had lulls in defense, but last night I thought for the time that we saw him in action, he was very responsible defensively. And obviously because of the height, he understood that uppercut was there for the taking. And Lemieux, his best chance was, you know, up in the, you know, that phone booth fight up in his chest. And he would be in the spot that he needed to be. But as soon as he let go, that, you know, Benavidez was ready to hit him with that uppercut. And it was like, man, it stopped him, stopped Lemieux in his tracks. And it's like, he did wing those hooks, and against maybe someone else, it would have broken through that guard, but it just didn't work. He didn't have enough in the limited amount of time, because every time he got caught with counters, even the jab was hurting him. You know, the force of Benavidez' punches was pretty crazy. So look, I would love to see Benavidez in against Caleb Plant. I'd love to eventually see him get a crack at Canelo. I don't think that happens. Maybe somebody, give me somebody, because I think he's ready. And it's funny because when you compare him to other guys his age, you know, he's just on another level because he's been world-class for so long. He's been fighting for so long at a high level. So you can talk about him against these other guys that are champions and have been around longer. So Jermall Charlo, yes, interesting, but you know, he hasn't fought at 168. So maybe give him some time to get acclimated to that division, because look, I don't believe in the whole I'm scared or this or that. People are businessmen and they're doing what they have to do. As a businessman, I would never let my fighter go into a fight against David Benavidez in a division that he's never fought before. You got to give him at least 1, if not 2 fights against somebody to get him acclimated and to get him comfortable at that division. So I don't think, as much as we see, you know, Mike Tyson trying to hype it up and you got to fight the Mexican monster, you know, telling Charlo that. I mean, I just don't think that that's going to fight. Even if he wanted that fight, it's just not smart from them. And, you know, obviously they're both, you know, backed by Al Heyman, Premier Boxing champions. It would be a fun fight, but I don't see that one happening. I think the one that should happen is Caleb Plant and David Benavidez. There's a lot of bad blood there, a contrast in styles, and would make for an interesting fight, I think.
Yeah, and I think they have a similar height, so that's not going to be a factor. It is going to be interesting to see how David Benavidez deals with someone so slick like Caleb. And to go back real quickly, I like that he had a challenge like Lemieux in front of him with their killer left hook, because it forces him to work on his defense. So we know he can be reliable on that in the future. But also, lastly, I want to make this final point. We're talking about upcoming matches this year. I want to see a matchup 2 or 3, maybe 4 years down the line. There's going to be a moment when these two guys are in the same weight class, with the same age, roughly the same height, and it's a good Mexican versus American, Mexican against Mexican fight. And that's David Benavidez versus Jaime Munguia. It could be Benavidez versus Zurdo, because
they work together. They sparred together.
They sparred together. It could be maybe Benavidez versus Zurdo, but something tells me that Benavidez versus Munguia might be a fight people will clamor for. in maybe 3 or 4 years. Again, I know Munguia, I'm a big fan of his. I've been following him and I worked with him before. And I know that he's still at 160 pounds doing a catch weight for this Kelly fight. But I'm thinking like, what's going to be an interesting fight 4 or 5 years down the line when these guys are 29 and 30 and they're well within a different weight class.
Also on Saturday night, we had a top-ranked card from Las Vegas headlined by middleweight heavy hitter Janibek, Qazaq style Alim Khanoli. He took on the previously unbeaten Danny Dignum in a 12-round bout for the interim WBO 160-pound title. Qazaq Thunder. He delivered a second-round knockout over Dignum and really put the rest of the division on notice. One of the quotes he had after the fight was like, look, I'm here. All the champs, fight me. You know, it's like his attitude is just like, I don't even want to talk. I'm just going to show and prove. Fight me. I'm all about, you know, that that action. So people like to see that. I mean, that's exciting stuff. Obviously, you know, when you start talking about Qazaq style, Qazaq Thunder, you start thinking about the heyday of the Jim Lampley quotes and Triple G. Absolutely. You know, yeah. So it kind of gives you that vibe a little bit. But what do you think about Janibek?
It does remind you of Triple G because of the Qazaq style, same country at 160 pounds. But Janibek has a different style. He's a southpaw. He's slick. As you can see in his fight against Danny Dignum, he knows how to break ankles. Right? And he's really good with his footwork and his foot feints. Aside from that, you know, one thing that we have to know is that the reason he fought a Danny Dignum, who's a respectable opponent, he was undefeated, was that there was some shenanigans within the rankings at 160 pounds in the WBO. Whether or not people feel it's a feasible option to face Janibek at this moment of their careers, I think something that's going down right now with a lot of the other players at 160 pounds. But at any rate, he is a force to be reckoned with. At 160, this interim belt gives him more leverage in seeking out bigger fights at that division. And so we'll have to see who he faces. I don't know what's happening with Demetrius Andrade. His fight got canceled. He might be moving up to 168 pounds. There are other people at 160 pounds that he could face. So we'll see. But so far, so good from Janibek. He's a top talent. And I think that a lot of people are going to have trouble with his style.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, the two fights that we've talked now back to back, the Janibek fight and the Benavidez fight, they both won interim titles, positioning themselves once again. It's just like a paper thing, but it positions you as that top guy. But, you know, we're saying the same thing pretty much. Like, who's going to step up to fight either one of these guys? Nobody's clamoring for that fight if you're the opponent. Demetrius Andrade, and probably rightfully so, is looking for a big money fight. If you're going to put the risk against Demetrius Andrade, he wants to get paid. And, you know, unfortunately, no promoter has been able to deliver a big time fight for him. And Eddie Hearn spoke to this previously, recently. And Hearn says, I haven't been able to deliver the fights. This isn't now a fight that he's going to step up and be like, yeah, I want the Janibek fight. Not going to happen. Who knows what he's going to do? He got injured. Now the fight is canceled. But yeah, it's hard to look and point at a guy, you know, that would really want to fight him. So you're gonna keep on lining him up, and he's probably gonna knock him out. You know, these mid-level guys, but eventually he's gonna corner one of these you know, sanctioning body spots like he's doing right now with WBO, and hopefully put himself in a position to fight for a title, because he seems, you know, as a 2016 Olympian, young in his pro career, in essence, 12-0, but he seems ready for a top level guy.
Right. Who knows? Maybe he fights Ryota Murata. He's coming off that loss against Triple G. He is a recognized name. We've seen him on top ranked cards. Wouldn't surprise me if that's in his near future.
Thank you for listening to the RBR Recap. Make sure to follow us on social media at RBR Recap and visit RBRRecap.com for the latest episodes.